Chuck Powers, Teaneck, with enormous admiration and appreciation for Holy Name and for a desire that it be a competent and modernizing institution. That doesn't mean that the exact form of this amendment is in fact right or being done at the right time. I have two questions to ask of Mr. Hughes. One, are you the author of all the versions of this plan which have occurred from June to the current? Mr. Hughes?
Relax, Chuck. Let him unmute.
No.
Are you not? Are you the author of them?
I'm the author of the document that's before the board. If you're referring
How about
to,
the one? How about the one
excuse
from?
me, let me answer.
Let him
I'm
answer
answering
his
your question. I'm the author of the document that's being presented to the board this evening. Prior documents that were drafted by my former partner, Richard Price, earlier in 2021, were not authored by me.
Are you the author of the September 28th version?
Yes.
Okay. At 3-1, whether you discuss what you must discuss in this amendment, is there a potential for negative impacts on the surrounding community? And such impacts can be substantially mitigated through zoning controls as outlined in section 3.2 and through private agreements between HNMC and its residential neighbors. I assume, therefore, that you are the author of that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell me why that same section in the document we are reviewing tonight no longer makes any reference to agreements between HNMC and its neighbors? Why was it originally an adverse impact that could be actually mitigated by such an agreement, but you found it necessary to remove that from the agreement, from the amendment that you are proposing tonight? Can you explain that, Mr. Hughes?
Sure. So it was determined that mentions of private agreements between private parties, separate and apart from the township's zoning code or planning documents, was not pertinent or appropriate for a master plan document. That's not.
How was that determined?
Excuse me. Let me.
He's
I'm
answering.
answering
Let
your
him
question.
answer.
I want to be very clear that that's not meant to imply or place any value judgment on whether or not an agreement or a deed restriction is a good idea. That it'd be wonderful if you could work out an agreement or a deed restriction with the hospital, but that's not pertinent to a master plan amendment, and that's not why it's in the document that's being presented to the board this evening.
It was permanent. It's in September. It no longer is permanent. Under whose direction was it removed, Mr. Hughes?
I don't recall.
You don't recall? A matter as important to this entire discussion?
Well, I just gave you my own opinion, which was why I removed it from the document. I don't know that anyone directed me to remove it.
You are the sole person responsible for the removal of that reference to the importance to mitigating the impacts on the community by virtue of an agreement. You are the person who decided that didn't belong in this agreement?
That's been asked and answered. What's the next question, sir?
That's the question.
It's been asked and answered according to the attorney. Go forward. 30 seconds left.
Has the attorney for the township of Teaneck or for this planning board been materially involved in your decision to remove it, Mr. Hughes?
Is the question, hold on. Yeah, whoa. Is the question, have you had conversations with the borough attorney about this document?
That's not my question. My question is very specific to this specific provision, which was in the September 28th version, and now has been removed. as a factor that would be mitigating the adverse impacts, well understood, as it should be.
Sir, is the question whether you want to know whether the attorneys were that the attorneys had stated something? If that's true, you can't answer that. It's privileged. You can't talk about what you had a conversation with an attorney for the.
I didn't ask if you had a conversation. I said was work.
It's privileged.
I asked a different.
I asked it, sir.
I asked
privileged. Next question.
Mr. Powers, you have 30 seconds left.
I'm going to go back. That's not the question I asked. I'm asking Mr. Hughes whether or not, under direction from the attorneys, he removed that provision.
And the answer was that anything direction from attorney is privileged information. So it's been asked and answered. Thank you very much, Mr. Powers.
Neighborhood. A master plan is your document. You set the conditions on what it would take to approve the master plan in May. We ask you to adhere to those very reachable conditions tonight. A deal is within your reach if you demand it. And just to clarify to Mr. Hughes' last comment to Mr. Powers, the statement about the deal with the neighbors was removed at the behest of the attorney for the hospital. You can amend the master plan as it is your document.
Mention this is to the neighbors. It is in the town's desire to start this process. That is the only intent at this time. Dialogue can and should continue immediately thereafter. I have already been in touch with the hospital this week, as well as you, the neighbors, of course, and both sides have expressed that desire to continue speaking. That said, the town wants an agreement signed by and between the neighbors in the hospital, and the town believes that the draft agreement prepared by the neighbors contains all the essential elements of the deal before the street is vacated and the matter is complete. The town has relayed to me the importance of this, since the town itself cannot bind the hospital to deed permanency. While I cannot guarantee that the process will not end without an agreement, I can only give you my word, and those of others who I've spoken with, that they want this matter settled permanently and will strive for it. I personally will not propose the introduction of any zoning ordinances in the future, and will oppose a vote against those ordinances unless if there is no signed deal between the parties. I could easily tell everyone what they want to hear, but that is not how I work. We are so close, but I think the finish line is out of reach without this process starting tonight.